Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. I seem to have the camera set a bit low. Let's just tweak that so you can see me and not the top of my head. Right, okay, thank you for tuning in. This is Elevenses. This is my twice weekly live show. It's going to be a fairly short one today because I'm fairly sure that you probably all want to be scooting off to listen to Test Match Special and see if England can manage to level the series against the Australians today. I also had a fairly late night out last night at a wedding, actually, so I'm a little bit knackered this morning. So, fairly short show for you today. We have Clive looking in. Good morning, Clive. Good to see you. Fairly interesting show. We'll be looking first of all at the story that the MCE Insurance broker has gone into administration, but policies will remain in force. We'll look at car parks and how they could be key sites, in fact, for solar power generation. A fire has hit Lydden race circuit in the it looks like it may have involved an electric car. We'll come back to that one as well. Superteens, they are getting a new race series as part of the British Superbikes, and they'll be getting Kawasaki's brand new Z4R to race. And finally, actionable signs and the fact there are two sides to every collision. That'll conclude the show in the in-depth article at the end of the show. So don't forget, you can sign up for the newsletter and you'll get all the articles that have gone onto my coffee page over the last week. The links to those are actually in the footer, the text footer to the show, but go and have a look and do subscribe to the newsletter if you want to. Always a good idea because you can get all the articles in one easy email into your inbox. You don't have to keep coming back and checking to see what I've written. Sue's looked in and Terry is here from New Zealand. Good to see you both as well. Right, so all right, on with the show. Now, don't forget, if you do have a question, any comments, I will try to get back to you before the end of the show if I possibly can. If I can't, I will certainly answer after the show. Right, so what have we got in the news for you today? Well, we have, first of all, the story that the motorcycle MCE Edwards Insurance Limited, the insurance broker. Let's try and get the names right. I was confusing myself here because the story is quite confusing. The Northamptonshire-based insurance broker MCE Insurance Limited. They've gone into administration again, unfortunately. Directors have placed the company into the administrator's care, and they say that's due to the firm's financial position. Now, in a statement, MCE Insurance Limited says the company will not be writing any new policies. The joint administrators are working closely with underwriters who are Sabre, and I'll come on to those in a moment, to find a resolution that minimises any disruption to existing policyholders and ensures they are treated fairly. All customers' existing policies remain in place. They will continue to have cover and they are not impacted by the appointment of the joint administrators. There is therefore no need or no action customers need to take. Sabre is not affected by this administration, will continue to meet valid claims made under existing policies. Now, this will probably confuse quite a few people because you may well remember it's not too long since the very similarly named MCE Insurance Company Limited, which was actually an insurance underwriter, and they were based in Gibraltar, they entered administration on the 19th of November in 2021. And here, policyholders were initially told their policies would be unaffected, but that statement was quickly reversed. Policies were terminated, and holders of those policies were forced, firstly, to get new insurance for their vehicles, mostly motorcycles, but also vans, I believe, and to claim back the unused portion of their premium from the administrator. So it was a bit of a nightmare for anybody who had insurance with MCE Insurance Company Limited. But this is different because the broker the current MCE company that has gone down the pan is a broker. So they simply sold you a policy that somebody else had put together. And that means basically that the policies they sold are created by Sabre Insurance Company Limited. Sabre, as the statement said, is not impacted by the development. That means all customers' policies remain intact, in force, and valid, and Sabre continue to handle and pay claims in the usual way. Now, Sabre have pointed out the need for people insured with MCE to continue to keep up payments, because obviously if you don't, that is when your policy could well be terminated. So make sure that if you do have an MCE policy, you do carry on making your payments as required. Okay, so again, it's a complicated story. Why MCE have gone down the pan, the brokers, is possibly due to a lack of public trust after their very similarly named insurance company went down the pan. So yeah, the perils of separating companies and calling them the same thing. Maybe a rebrand would have been a good idea there, but hey ho. Right, okay, now many problems, actually, I always think just need everybody to take a step back, have a look at it, and try and rethink things from a slightly different perspective. Now, take the proposals for vehicles that aren't powered by fuels derived from oil. Now, many people are questioning, not unreasonably, where the energy to run electric vehicles, for example, will come from. One suggestion is that we go down the route of creating lots of hydrogen, but frankly, the sums don't really stack up that we're going to be able to use hydrogen in any quantity. You still have to ship it from wherever it's created, and you're going to need a lot of energy to create hydrogen. So the biofuels, I've already talked about the biofuels and how you would have to put sort of vast amounts of the country under production of bio crops specifically to turn into fuel. That's not likely to happen anytime soon. There probably will be niche fuels for sort of classic vehicles and things, but is likely to be at considerable expense. So the obvious choice, really, I keep coming back to it, is electricity, and the source to power that, assuming you don't go down the really bonkers route of generating your electricity with fossil fuels, which simply moves the problem somewhere else, is to use renewable energy sources, wind and solar. Now, the solar panels have been developing, over the years. They have changed formats, they have improved dramatically, and look, unlike the early solar panels, which frankly needed the sun beating down on them to do anything useful, modern solar panels not only work obviously when the sun's shining, but they're also reasonably efficient at producing energy even when it's cloudy. When I wrote this, I said such as when it is today, but it's actually turned into a nice bright sunny morning at the moment. The cloud and rain has blown away. So the question is, of course, where do you place solar panels? Because you do need quite a surface area to do anything useful. Well, if you can park in a way that allows you to charge your car at home, of course, then the roof of your house makes good sense, presuming that, of course, you have a roof that goes the right way, that you actually have a roof. We live in a flat. Sticking solar panels on the roof here would be problematic with the other leaseholders. And, of course, if it won't work if your roof is actually overshadowed. If you live in the middle of a forest, for example, it's going to be a bit tricky. So, as you've probably been out and about on the bike, you will have seen fields full of solar panels. But do we really need to use sort of perhaps prime agricultural land, and places which, frankly, possibly you don't want to see a solar farm anyway? Well, no, not necessarily. And it all comes down to thinking about how land in this country is actually used. Now, one of the problems with using lots of road transport is that you also end up with considerable amounts of land covered with tarmac. And right now, all that happens to that tarmac is the energy from the sun heats it up. Now that can be quite significant. When the outside air temperature is 25 degrees, it's probably climbing to something a couple of degrees below that today, and the sun is high in the sky, as it is at the moment, asphalt in the sun can easily exceed 50 degrees centigrade, and at that point it actually starts to soften and it can be damaged. In fact, including to an article according to an article in Scientific American, road temperatures in the Phoenix area of Arizona, which is a baking hot part of the USA, have actually been recorded at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's over 80 Celsius on particularly hot days. Simply because they have days and days and days when the sun shines. And here's the second problem. All that absorbed energy which goes into the tarmac and heats it up remains in the tarmac during the hot day, and the problem for the residents is that come the evening, when you would hope that some cooling air would actually drift through the city and cool it down a little bit, all that tarmac is re-radiating that heat back into the air, so it stays hot at night, and then the next day is even hotter, and so on. So it's time for a rethink, perhaps about cars and the tarmac they're actually sitting on. Now, we may not be able to cover roads and shade them, but one thing we can do is ask where it is that drivers want to park their cars. Now, I've mentioned home already, but what if they're away from home? Well, they're going to need to park them in some kind of car park, aren't they? And at that point, the cars are sitting around doing nothing. That means there are actually vast areas of tarmac just being heated up with the cars sitting on top of them. And that energy, it's been realised, could be intercepted by solar panels, protecting the cars themselves from the rays of the sun and keeping them a little bit cooler, but also protecting the tarmac underneath them. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that car parks tend to sit next to the kind of facilities that want to draw on that power. There are often huge car parks at shopping centres, at hospitals, at sports facilities. Even office blocks tend to have fairly big car parks. So placing arrays of solar panels in the car parking areas actually allows that otherwise barren tarmac to do something useful. Now, one such installation has just gone on. It's just been installed. It says the press release, outside the offices of what was actually unnamed, a major car manufacturer in the south of England. So my guess is it's possibly BMW. And they say that what they've done is they've put 2,000 solar panels in place, and from that array of the solar cells which sits over their car park, peak output is just under a megawatt of energy, and that is sufficient. I did some number crunching. You should get power for just about around 250 homes out of 1 megawatt of power, or around 150 cars, EVs, being charged over the course of the day. So that's a fairly significant chunk of power. Now, we're not thinking this far ahead in the UK, as predictable really, I guess. The French Senate recently approved legislation that actually makes it mandatory for all existing and new car parks with 80 spaces or more to be covered by solar panels. That's really, really interesting development. So what's the wider potential for this? Well, a new report has been published by the countryside charity, the Council for the Protection of Rural England, who, as you're probably likely to guess, aren't very keen on having solar farms placed in sort of rural areas, let alone wilderness areas. And they're in partnership with the University College of London's Energy Institute, and basically what they estimate is that around 11 gigawatts of electricity could be generated simply by roofing 50% of all car parks in the UK with solar panels. Now, to put that into the broader context, the UK currently has a solar capacity of around 15 gigawatts in total. And it's estimated that we would require something like 40 gigawatts of solar power by 2030 to meet net zero targets. And that's according to the Solar Energy UK organisation. So if you can generate around 11 gigawatts rather of energy through car parks, you're actually well on the way to reaching that total of 40 gigawatts. You're up to 26 gigawatts out of the 40 required. So big chunk. And other people have looked at the number crunching that has been done by UCL, and they think it's actually a significant underestimate, since it was based on an estimate of just 50% of the car parks being covered and an estimate of 130 square kilometres of car parking spaces in the UK. But estate agents Frank Knight, or is Knight Frank, sorry, Knight Frank, they say there's more like 200 square kilometres of car park, so at least 60% more. So there is an option which puts solar panels where they do something useful, not only by shielding cars from the hot sun and the stopping the tarmac being melted, but also generating energy. So I think that's a great story there. Right, okay, what else have we got to talk about? Well, there was a big blaze at Lydden Hill Race Circuit near Canterbury in Kent on Friday morning, and multiple fire engines, 9 appliances were actually sort of scrambled to the area to control this fire. Now, the what apparently happened is that the team, if I can actually get the photograph to scroll through, there we go. The Lancia Delta E team, this is Sebastian Loeb's Special One World Rallycross team, was hit by the blaze. Now, Loeb is the most successful driver in the World Rally Championship ever, and he came back to the competition specifically to race for this team, and it seems that the team's entire garage area, which included two race cars, presumably the ones seen here, and trucks which were used to transport to the surface, were all burned out in this fire, and it happened just ahead of the World Rallycross Championship, which takes place at Lydden every year. Now, no injuries were reported, thankfully, and the race circuit said they would be continuing to give further updates as we continue to assess and monitor the situation. But it was announced almost immediately that the FIA World Rallycross Championship races scheduled for Saturday would not take place. Now, it seems the fire started about 8:45 in the morning, and by 2:30 Kent Fire and Rescue were saying that they still had 4 fire engines and a bulk water carrier at the scene, with crews continuing to dampen any remaining hotspots. Now, investigations into the cause of the blaze are of course underway, and KFRS have said the cause is not yet known. So although I don't want to jump the gun, I will point out that the Special One team are using an electric Lancia Delta Evo modified to compete in the E races in that series there. Okay, so one of the most successful race series here in the UK, for motorcycles at least, has been the Superteens rounds. Now, they may not be the series that has created all the big column inches, or even gained the TV coverage. You know, when you watch the highlight package of British Superbikes on TV, you never see anything other than the sort of top races. But the series it's the entry level. It's offered many riders, both past and the current crop of British Superbike riders. It's offered them their inexpensive chance to get established as part of the top motorcycle race event in the UK, the British Superbike Championship. Currently supported by Bennett's, of course. Now, next year the class is going to be relaunched as a one-make series, and it's going to be supported by Kawasaki, so it will be the Kawasaki British Super Team Championship, and it will be open to riders from 15 to 20. And the interesting thing is that the event will feature the new Ninja ZX 4RR. Now, the series was officially launched in the UK brands this week, when the first of the new Kawasaki 404s was actually put on show. The Superteen series is going to be running across 8 double header rounds at the UK's circuits, and there will be, it's hoped, a support race at the World Superbike event too. So it all helps riders develop their skills, and the overall winner of the Superteen class for 2024 will not only get themselves obviously established on the sort of racing stage, but they're also going to win a brand new Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R road bike. Now, the race bikes themselves will be built by MSS Performance, so they should all be sort of equal out of the box. There will be 2 options though, with the less expensive package coming in at under £12,000 plus VAT, so a relatively cheap way into racing. And Stuart Higgs, who's the Bennett's British Superbike Championship Races director. He says it's 32 years since the British circuit promoters launched the first Superteen Championship, and within that entry list was James Hayden, David Jeffries, John McGuinness and Michael Rutter. And so there, he says, we're tremendously excited to bring Superteen racing back to the championship. So they're good for the youngsters there. That should make for some interesting racing. And it will also, I hope, answer some questions about what use a 404 motorcycle is as well, because I know that some people have been suggesting that it's underpowered for modern roads. Nonsense, in my opinion. Right, okay, so no new bikes in the news for you today, but I do have some new heads-up glasses from BMW. Now, the idea of heads-up glasses, it's a concept which has been heads-up displays for motorcycles generally. It's a concept that seems to resurface every couple of months, ever since the military started using heads-up displays. Now, the idea of a heads-up display is that you display the information that you need in your line of sight. So rather than glancing down at a dial or display of some sort, it's right where you can see it. You just have to kind of focus through it to see what's beyond it. Now, predictably, of course, heads-up displays have appeared in top-of-the-range vehicles first of all. BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Lexus, Jaguar and Land Rover are just some of the vehicles I investigated have heads-up displays, and it's starting to move down to less expensive models, I guess. But I suppose motorcycle manufacturers have had a far tougher time with heads-up displays, since there's no sort of glass windshield in front of the rider, and I guess that's why it is that the quest for a heads-up display for bikers has been restricted to displays built into helmets with varying degrees of success or lack of it. It's interesting that of all the manufacturers of helmets, only Shoei of the mainstream manufacturers has gone with a heads-up display. I don't know of any other. They've all been startups, some of which didn't start up for very long, took their money with them. But they've all been based really, I guess, on an idea that some riders saw some mileage in the glasses developed by Google, and probably some other technology companies were looking at similar things to create a smart, that is connected rather than fashionable, set of wearable lenses. So this is the sort of thing that we were looking at. And as you can see, that some fairly unusual celebrities were involved in promoting this package. Now, this is the Google Glass project. It kicked off with these augmented reality glasses, giving you that heads-up display, an interactive experience and access to various digital information, but they also included a camera. So that's Prince Charles, of course, as he was wearing them back in 2012. Now, at the time, the heavy press coverage generated quite a lot of excitement and interest, and I remember people talking about how they revolutionised riding motorcycles. And there were potential applications, industry, healthcare and sports as well. But the actual reception of the Google Glass as a consumer item was actually quite lukewarm, because I think early adopters found them quite flawed. And I guess one of the problems was that you ended up looking a bit like, that's not, there we go, that's the one I wanted, Locutus, a Borg, that if you're a Star Trek fan you'll probably recall the Patrick Stewart character. I don't think that resemblance really helped very much. So whilst there's still sort of an enterprise edition of the glasses, targeted at businesses and professionals, they have specific uses like logistics, healthcare. The consumer version actually didn't last very long. It was discontinued in January 2015, so literally just a couple of years. But BMW, presumably desperate to get the technology to bikers, they have borrowed this augmented glasses idea, and this is what the BMW glasses look like. Let me get that picture up on screen as well, and here we go. As you can see, they're rather more conventional looking. They just look like a pair of sunglasses, don't they? Now, this is the new BMW Motorrad Connected Ride Smart Glass. and they are intended to mark 100 years of BMW motorcycling. The company says they can be adapted to fit numerous helmets and face shapes, and this makes the smart glasses comfortable to wear even on long day trips. The lithium-ion battery enables up to 10 hours of operation. BMW Motorrad supplies 2 sets of certified UVA, UVB lenses with the frame, and one set of lenses is 85% transparent, and that can be used for helmets with integrated sun visors, and the other set is tinted, so basically they are like the sunglasses that you see. Now the interesting thing is the lenses can be ground, which means that they can be adapted to suit riders who would normally wear optical correcting glasses, and they're also said, of course, be compatible with contact lenses. Now they're charged by USB. They have a 10-hour battery life, as I just mentioned. They can be connected to a smartphone and also directly to the BMW Motorrad connected app via Bluetooth, allowing real-time GPS data to transfer from the app to the smart glasses. So you can set up your HUD function for navigation, you can display speed limit, you can display gear, although quite why you would want to on the 2 bikes that it's available for at the moment. We'll come on to that in just a minute. You can either have a minimalist arrow display, a bit like the Beeline navigating device, or you can show detailed information with street names, intersections, precise directions, and so on. They're expected to arrive later this year. Euro price has been announced as €690, so I think that's probably about, what is it, about £640 or something at the moment, current exchange rate, rough guess. So what do they connect to? Well, right now only the BMW CE02 and CE04 electric scooters. Now I imagine that what we'll see very soon is an optional upgrade to the other ranges of motorcycles sometime in the not too distant future. Right, we have some comments here which have all come in. We've got Nigel here. Good morning, Nigel, not seen you for a bit. John Quirk, he says he's from Guildford and it's more or less sunny down there. Good to hear that. Kevin's here too. What's Terry got to say? He says we have the option of self-insuring in New Zealand. Yeah, you know, we don't. Obviously in the UK we have to get official insurance. Yes, MCE, their insurance was offshore based, the insurance company that went down in Gibraltar, so different trade rules from over here. He also says, cautionary tale in respect of paving the country with solar panels is that global warming brings with it more frequent severe weather events. Yeah, well, the theory is, of course, that if you cover your pavement with solar panels, you're actually absorbing that energy, so it's not heating the ground. So it would be beneficial. Terry then mentions hailstorms. Well, hopefully they would make them robust enough to accept that impact. He also says, what's this, that race cars run total loss ignition, so they might be using lithium-ion batteries as their power source. Well, that's possible, but these are e-cars, so they're basically propelled by electricity, not just running lithium-ion batteries. Right, okay, so thanks for that, Terry. Time to move on to today's discussion point, fairly quick one, as I said. The point I really wanted to make here was sort of follow up from last week's discussion point, which was all about the need for evidence-based road signs. Now, I got some feedback, incidentally, on last week's item from the DocBike team themselves down in Dorset, because what I pointed out last week was that DocBike have been supporting the placement of signs which really do use evidence that there is a collision risk in that particular area. Now, Shell Silver, who's their research assistant, she says very reasonably that in their press release they haven't mentioned in any depth the psychological theory that underpins their work, which is fair enough, because I know that sort of thing makes many average riders sort of just look away now kind of thing. But she also points out that the signage is also very much in the trial phase, and she says they are collating longitudinal and real-time stats before looking to trial it in other areas of the UK. And again, that's entirely reasonable, science-based. That is what I would like to say, to be to see, and that's, as I say, it seems to be in total contrast to what I was criticising about the Warwickshire scheme, where they, their evidence-based gathering for popping up road signs was actually standing there, sort of taping them to street lights and saying that they must be in the right place because they saw a lot of bikes going past while they were doing it, which is, it's bonkers. It's just, they're so naive. I'm almost speechless when it comes to explaining how naive that is as an approach. And finally, Shell also said, I'm pleased you have interpreted the "have you been seen" message for the job it's designed to do. Now, the term for this "have you been seen" sign that I was actually struggling to remember last week, thanks to Malk for reminding it, is that the sign is what's called actionable. Now, actionable signs provide clear, specific and positive instructional guidance for people to actually do in response to having seen it. That's what's essential. Actionable signs have to be easily understood because we have to process the information quickly and then respond to it, and we need to bring about the appropriate action without confusion or delay. So the advice has to be right. Now, Malk also gave me a very good example of actually two similar sounding instructions, only one of which is likely to create the right action. And this is basically climbing a ladder. Think about it. You could tell someone to not look down. What's the inevitable response to that? Well, first thing, you're wondering why you shouldn't look down. And then second thing, you'll probably look down to find out why you shouldn't be looking down. So what it tells you to do is the opposite to what you want the instructions to do. So negative instructions like that, don't look down, are really, really poor. Don't. So yeah, try not to do that if you're putting up actionable signs. The alternative is to say look up. And that's positive and actionable, because after being told to look up, the chances are that's exactly what you'll do. You'll keep your eyes oriented upwards, which is always a good thing when you're climbing a ladder. So I still think bike as a sign is not actionable, and I still think that the response to that from the average driver is, yeah, I do think bike, or okay, I've thought bike. What am I supposed to do now with that? So one thing that I would like to see in all these interventions is more work on the rider's side of the collision. We've always kind of taken the think bike process as being the way to tackle junction collisions, but as I've said, turn the two words around and you've got biker think, and that's what I would like to see a lot more work on. Now, looking at the research into junction collisions, there are papers that look at issues like the rider's reaction to a right-of-way violation. There is the work of James Ulay that I have mentioned a number of times. He came up with a kind of 3-second break point for collisions. What he said basically is if the right-of-way violation, if the vehicle that pulls into the rider's path is more than 3 seconds away when that right-of-way violation happens, there's probably no crash, because the rider is going to see it and react in time, and the driver probably has time to get clear of the bike, and they hopefully won't panic, hit the brakes and end up straddled across the lane, which happens all too often, of course. But once the time gap is less than 3 seconds, that's when things are likely to go wrong. The rider is likely to freeze or overreact. A lot of riders in these instances actually lock up and fall off way before they get anywhere near the car. And the driver is likely to freeze too, in which case they probably hit the brakes and, as I say, stop straddling the junction. That's when things go wrong, inside that 3-second break point. But what I've seen remarkably little of is any sense that there's research being done on the sort of the human visual perception issues that I've talked about for car drivers. Nothing seems to have been done in terms of riders, and the fact that they seem to be we seem to be incapable of spotting the possibility of turning or emerging cars until it is often too late. Now, I guess with the lack of that underpinning research, which just doesn't seem to be there, it's not entirely surprising that the, conventionally road safety campaigns or interventions have followed what's known, and they stick to targeting the think bike or look twice for bikes, which at least is an actionable suggestion. But again, it's focusing entirely on the car driver's error. It's not focusing on the fact that the rider hasn't seen what's coming. The other side of the think bikes is the sort of make yourself easier to see, but it's not targeting the rider in terms of how the rider is about to react to the possibility of an emergency. And I do find it remarkable, this alternative approach to prevent the motorcyclist from riding into a collision when the driver sets it up has and remains almost totally ignored. Now, it's getting on for 30 years that I've been working in rider safety at one level or another, and it's really convinced me that we do vitally need new ideas to help the rider think about how to avoid potential collisions. That's what's needed. It's not no use keep focusing on the driver, because I'd say that it doesn't work. I'd say also that most motorcyclists would be open to new ideas about protecting themselves if they were well argued, logically derived, and have a clear benefit to the rider. That's the most important point. But as long as road safety authorities appear to heap blame on drivers by saying didn't look properly, I've lost count of how many times I read that or even repeat it here on Elevenses or write about it in my columns. And simply telling riders to take more care or slow down, that's never going to work successfully. There's always that why question that is never answered. So hopefully I will say that I hope that those have you been seen signs, the actionable signs from DocBike, are actually the first step in the right direction. Right, that is it for today. As I said, fairly short show today. If you want to catch these shows, they go out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, almost always live, occasionally recording, very, very rarely I miss a show. If you miss a show, easiest way to find them is head to my Survival Skills UK YouTube channel, where you will find them all listed. They go up just a few minutes after I complete the show. And if you can support my show via my coffee page, buy me a coffee, I'm always mighty grateful for that, as I am to all of you who take your time to look in on the show. So I'm going to round it off today. Aaron has Nigel's just said, while I'm studying the information on my HUD glasses, will I spot any roadside info signs? He says, I'm not totally sarcastic, but I do wonder about refocusing from glasses mounted HUDs to distant roads. Me too, actually. He says he has an HUD in the car and must admit it's handy, but it's not that close to my face. Yeah, the way they work on the heads-up helmets is that they project the image at a virtual distance from you, so it's not like you're having to focus on something which is just an inch or so from your eye. It does appear to be floating in space some feet in front of you, so it's not quite as bad as kind of looking at your tip of your finger or something. But even so, I'm kind of doubtful that I want that information in my eye line all the time. I kind of like the idea of seeing the world outside, and yeah, if I have to refocus, it's just a case of refocusing at the right moment, isn't it? It's not something that you have to do at the wrong moment. And Aaron says, if the tech they use for aircraft helmets is employed, it's focused to infinity. Well, it can't be focused to infinity, I wouldn't have thought, because if it were, you'd kind of, not everything you look at is infinity. I don't know. I see what you're driving at. Yeah, that it's focused a long way in front of you, and that's basically what I've just said to Nigel. Yeah, okay. All right, so interesting. Thanks for your feedback on the topics today. Always interesting to hear what you have to say, guys and gals. So anyway, that's it for today. Before I start wambling on, I will say thank you very much once again for looking in. Always appreciated. If you are out there riding today, it's a real mixed bag of weather. It's pretty rough up north. Hopefully the weather is just clearing away from the test match pitch to allow them to get out there and see to the Australians sometime later today. Anyway, thank you again for looking in, and if you are out there riding on your bike, be careful as you always, and stay shiny side up.